Welcome back to another edition of Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this Saturday morning. The goal of this show is to try to show you natural solutions to some of today's worst health problems and talk about some interesting health topics that I think might really improve your health and your future. Because my purpose for being here, my purpose for going to work every day is to try to help as many people as possible live a healthier life using totally natural solutions. And so I'm so excited to be able to bring that to this show every single week. And I've got an interesting show for you today. Over the last few weeks, we've been changing the show up just a little bit. You know, normally we come on here and we talk about chronic disease. And over the last several shows, we've been lightening it up a little and talking more about food items and other health topics that I think might really be able to help you in the future. I'm here with my co-host, Brandon Como. Brandon, how are you this morning?
Doing good, Doc.
Man, I'm excited. I tell you, the show that I have for you today is something that I've spoken about many times. I've spoken about this over the last 10 years on both of my radio shows that I've had and my Facebook show that I do. And whenever I'm talking to patients in my office, I've spoken many times about the harmful effects of chemicals in our homes and in our surroundings and how they're affecting our health. And I really feel like that whenever I do that, sometimes it sort of just goes over people's heads. You know, Brandon, it's like I've been talking about how toxic our environment is, and people don't get it, I don't think, sometimes, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You're going to put it in real world terms.
You really do. And so people just kind of, I think that goes in one ear and out the other. But I wanted to talk about some facts on these chemicals in our surroundings and get down to the really details of it so that whenever I talk about it, you'll kind of get me. You'll kind of understand what I mean by that. So there's some world-renowned researchers that released a new article that I wanted to start with today. And these two researchers are no slouches. One of them is Dr. Philip Grandjean from the Harvard School of Medicine, and the other one is Dr. Landrigan from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, which is one of my favorite places to read their work is Mount Sinai. But they reviewed hundreds of studies and released their opinion. And they've really sounded the alarm on how destructive these chemicals are to our health. And, you know, all I can tell them is welcome to the party, guys. You know, I've been saying this for a decade now, and they could have just called me. But this is something that these researchers have finally started to address. And let me just say, I'm joking around, but I'm really glad that some other professionals are starting to take this issue on. And so they agree with me that the chemicals in our surroundings are making us sick. And this is their quote: "Humans are using more chemicals than ever before, and these chemicals are not even required to be tested before they're put into our surroundings. And there are literally thousands of environmental chemicals used in our homes, our food, our agriculture, our clothing, and our water, and they're damaging us and damaging our children." And these doctors are calling for a global prevention strategy. And of course, I couldn't agree with that more. But listen, I mean, honestly, Brandon, that's not going to happen. You know, there's too much money in these chemicals.
Absolutely.
These are some of the largest companies in the world. They have too many lobbyists to ever have any really effective laws come down on them.
But is there a way to kind of chip at that? I mean, I know it's like the big elephant, but kind of chipping at it slowly.
There is, but you know, you have to do it on your own. You have to take kind of your own responsibility, because you're probably not going to see any major legislation to try to work on these chemicals. So it's up to each family to kind of do it on their own. I mean, we're talking Dow, Procter and Gamble, Monsanto Seed. I mean, these companies basically own, you know, the Congress, and so you're just not gonna see anything like that. So here's the truth: you're exposed to more chemicals and toxins from the time you wake up in the morning until the time you leave your house to go to work than our ancestors were in their entire lifetime. So here's what I mean. You wake up and get up from your mattress that's probably been coated with fire retardant chemical. It's been proven to cause major hormone disruptions and mental problems. You step onto your carpeting that's been coated with stain repellent chemicals that have proven to cause diabetes and obesity. You get a drink of water that contains arsenic, fluoride, chlorine, and many other unknown chemicals and heavy metals and toxins. And then you may have a cup of coffee that contains pesticides, and if you use a plastic cup, you're probably getting, chemicals from that. And then you take a shower and the water's absorbed into your skin. You use soaps and shampoos that contain phthalates and sulfides that, have shown to cause anxieties and ADDs. And you put on your dry clean shirt that's loaded with harmful chemicals, or your flame retardant coveralls that's loaded with chemicals. And, there's a knock at the door and the exterminator comes to spray your house with harmful chemicals. And then you eat a breakfast that's probably something you threw in the microwave that's processed, that loaded with chemicals. And then you clean your kitchen counter with chemicals, and you spray air freshener before you leave the house, which is nothing but pure chemicals. So do you see how this is something that's only been around about the last 75 years as we solve our problems with chemicals these days? We're a chemical society. And so these things are building up in our bodies over time. And of course, one of these things by itself is not going to harm you. These things, if you spray them one day, is not going to make you sick. And that's part of the way this lulls us into not thinking these things aren't a problem, is it takes years of this stuff to build up in our body before it starts to really affect us. But the average American now ingests 14 pounds of chemicals every single year. And so the reason that I went through all of that from the time you wake up thing, is to just make you realize how almost everything that we touch has some sort of a chemical design or coating or something that was involved in the manufacturing of it, has to do with these chemicals. And many of them are now being shown to be harmful to our health. And that's because they build up in our bodies over time. And as we've become a more chemical society, the rates of depression, anxiety, ADD, thyroid problems, obesity, diabetes, and cancer have skyrocketed. And I'm here to tell you there's a direct link between those conditions and these chemicals. And these Harvard researchers agree with me. So this is not just me. These Harvard researchers have now looked at it, and they have agreed that this is something that we all need to be aware of. Now, also, the International Organization for Medical Professionals just looked at this as well, and they're finally waking up too. They looked at studies on environmental chemicals and exposure to them, and they released some data proving that what I've been talking about the last 10 years is actually something we need to be concerned about. They had a group of researchers and physicians from America, Canada, and England, and also the World Health Organization, and this was their quote. Quote, "We are drowning our world in untested and unsafe chemicals, and the price we are paying in terms of our health is of serious concern." So finally, they're getting it. And they actually added up that they cited that 7 million people die every year from indoor and outdoor chemical exposure. Now, it's actually many, many times that. It's much higher than that. What they mean is 7 million people die from a direct chemical exposure. But if you have these chemicals that contribute to your obesity and you die from complications from that, like diabetes, that doesn't get counted as a chemical death. It gets counted as a diabetes death. Or if these chemicals cause cancer and you die from cancer, that doesn't get rated as a chemical death. That gets rated as a cancer death.
So that's what I was about to ask. I mean, none of the deaths that you're talking about are attributed specifically to this, in the sense of, like, when you're calculating deaths for a national, average or national numbers or whatever, it's all attributed to the diseases that are coming out of ingesting these articles.
Right. Yeah, they don't even look at that. The 7 million they stated was just direct chemical exposure, but it's many more times that on the health problems that it's causing. And they looked at just hormone disrupting chemicals, which are everywhere, but the effect on thyroid, female, and body hormones. And this group of medical professionals estimated that just in Europe, it was $157 billion, or it's euros, a year that it's costing them in just hormone disrupting chemicals. The cost to children in the United States to hormone and behavior altering chemicals, they estimated, was $76 billion just in 2008. And so these chemicals have been connected to attention problems, learning difficulties, depression, anxiety, and among many other health problems in children. And, they did a study on the cord blood of infants. And don't quote me on this because I hadn't seen this study in a long time, Brandon, but I remember reading it. And I think they tested for over 100. I'm pretty sure it was over 100 chemicals. And they found almost every chemical in every cord blood of babies that were just born. So we're exposed to chemicals before we're even born from, through the mother. So these companies like Monsanto Seed and Dow Chemical and others don't have your best health in mind. And so it's up to each one of us to start to try to reduce these chemicals as much as we possibly can. And, they don't have to prove that these chemicals are harmless before they use them. In fact, it's almost the reverse of that. There has to be a whole stack of empirical data that these chemicals are harmful before they have to do something to take them off the market. And even that's really hard to get done. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about are these Chinese products. The Chinese are doing us no favor with the products that they're sending over here. They are very toxic in so many cases. They've done studies on toys that have lead paint in them, a big percentage of them that come from China. These little metal bracelets that, like little girls wear that come out of like the gumball machines. Yeah. Those things are loaded with really toxic heavy metals. I mean, these Chinese products are not doing us any favors. And so you'll see, like I've seen parents, they'll get a new toy for their kid, maybe for their infant, like for their baby, and they'll take it directly out of the packaging and hand it to them, and they'll pick it up and put it right in their mouth. Yeah. And so what you want to do is you want to try to find non-toxic toys, first of all, and then you want to wash them really good, before. It was funny when my son was little, he just knew if he got a new stuffed animal or he got a new toy, it went to take a bath first, and he actually helped me give it a bath, so it was kind of funny. But we always try to wash everything. And listen, the goal is here, guys, you're not going to get rid of them. You're not, and knowing what I know, I could drive myself crazy if I really said I've got to get rid of all these things, because you're not. What I always told myself with my son and with my family is let's try to cut down 50% of these. If we can just cut 50% down, because you're not going to get them all, and you can spend 24 hours a day trying to find things with no chemicals in them if you try. So just try to cut down 50% of it in your family, and it will be enough to make a difference. Your body can detox from these things, but the problem is our bodies are sort of overwhelmed. It can't detox as fast as we're putting those things in. So when we get back from break, I'm going to go through the top 5 things that you should be looking for whenever it comes to chemicals in our environment. And then even after that, we're going to get into some really neat information on food additives. And I have something called the Dorito effect. And what that means is we are getting the experience of the food, but we're not actually getting the nutrition. So we're getting the strawberry experience, but we're not getting the nutrition of a strawberry. It's very fascinating. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you for joining us. We are discussing the toxins and chemicals in our environment today. And whenever I talk to people about this, they don't realize the magnitude of what I'm saying we're actually dealing with. I consider this one of the major health problems of the next 40 or 50 years is how are we going to deal with all of the side effects of the chemicals that we've put in our environment and what we're going to do about the health problems that those things have caused. There's 188 million pounds of chemicals dumped in our water every year, 1.4 billion pounds dumped in our air every year, and there's 2.8 billion, with a B, pounds of chemicals dumped on our ground year after year after year. And then not to mention all the chemicals that are in toys and plastics and water in our food containers and in our home, like carpeting and cleaners and furniture and and all the products that we use, it all adds up. And I was buying a couch, Brandon. I guess it's been about a year now. And as I was checking out, the salesman said, "Hey, we have this special coating that we can put on your couch. And it will cut you a great deal on it, and it prevents stains." And of course, I knew that was perfluorinated chemicals, and that those things cause health problems. So I said no. And he asked me again, and so we were finishing the checkout process, and he asked me again, and so finally I said no. And I just left it at that. And then a few minutes later, the manager walks over, and he starts trying to pitch me on this coating for this couch, And he said, "Man, why, you got to have this. You have a little boy. This is going to prevent stains." And so finally, I kept saying no, and he goes, "Well, why not?" And he wishes he really wouldn't have asked me that, because I explained for about 5 minutes what that actually was they were putting on that couch. They were putting something called perfluorinated chemicals, which resist grease, water, and stains. These are also in the family of Teflon and nonstick pans. Also, fast food wrappers are coated with this, and microwave popcorn. So perfluorinated chemicals have been proven to cause obesity, thyroid dysfunction, cancers, hormone disruptions, and mental disorders if they build up in your body. Now, the other one that I wanted to go through are phthalates, and these are what give plastic flexibility. So if you have a water bottle, you can squeeze it and the plastic won't break. It won't break apart. Phthalates are what allow this to happen. And they're also in soaps and shampoos and makeup. And these are thyroid and hormone disruptors, obesity, diabetes, and also ADD. Now, the next one is BPA. These are also in plastics, and these have been proven to cause thyroid problems, hormone disruption, breast and prostate cancer, also early onset of puberty in girls. Now, get this. The average age of puberty in girls 50, 60 years ago was around 13. Now it's gone down to 9. And so, Brandon, you've seen these kids, and you're like, they're how old? Yeah. The reason that that's happening is that there's so much BPA in our teenagers, in their bodies, that it's changing the rate that they go into puberty, because it's an estrogen mimicker. Also connected with ADD, bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. Now, the last one are these flame retardant chemicals. And these are in furniture, mattresses, carpeting, electronics, also thyroid, hormone disruption, ADD, fatigue, and brain fog. Now, I didn't want to get too deep in the weeds on that with you guys, but I just wanted to show you what the top 4 chemicals that we're exposed to cause. Think about the health problems of 10 people you know. Do you know anybody that has diphtheria or tuberculosis? No. We know people that have thyroid problems, hormone disruptions, obesity, diabetes, prostate and breast cancer, puberty problems, depression, anxiety, mental disorders. This is where all this stuff's coming from, guys. This is the challenge in healthcare in the next 50 years, is how we deal with the side effects of all of these environmental pollutants and chemicals that we're exposed to. So the solutions are, you want to try to eat a clean diet. Avoid these chemicals whenever you can. Use green cleaners and non-chemical air fresheners. Skip the plastic. I use glass containers around my house for my food, especially if it's leftovers that are hot. If you're taking something off the stove and you're putting it away and you put it in a plastic Tupperware case, those chemicals immediately begin to be leached out into the food. So I have a lot of glass containers around my house. Whenever I take hot food off, I put it in the glass. Now, if I'm just going to throw like maybe some salad and something like that in a Tupperware to bring to work, that's different. You're not going to really get that. But if it's hot food or something like that, it's going to leach chemicals out of the plastic into your food. Now, eat an organic diet as much as you can, at least something that we call the top 12. You can do a Google search for what's called the Dirty Dozen top 12 chemical foods you should eat organic, and at least pick from that list. So if you can't afford to eat everything organic, at least I make sure I at least get those top 12 things organic, because they're the most highest percentage of chemicals in that food item. So if you'll just pick those top 12, But just be aware of what these chemicals do to your body in long term, and avoid them whenever possible. People don't think about this because it's a cumulative effect. I was talking to an exterminator about this one time, and he said, "Oh, it won't make you sick." Kind of like, okay, I know when you spray today, it won't make me sick, but that's not really what I'm saying. That's what people think, though. Oh, well, I sprayed Roundup; it didn't make me sick. I felt fine. And so it's not an immediate thing. It's a long-term buildup in our body that when we get 40 or 50, now our thyroid stops working, or our hormones are out of balance, or things like that. And so it's a long-term buildup. It's not an immediate type thing that we see. Now, there's also some really, and these big chemical companies also are very tricky because they know now everybody's talking about BPA. You're starting to see BPA-free baby bottles and BPA-free food containers. So I wanted to call attention to another industry trick that we're dealing with right now, and this is sort of how these big corporations look at this. They know that BPA has a bad rep now, and everybody's heard about that, and we're seeing more and more labels that are BPA-free. But we've now discovered that they are using a new chemical and replaced it called BPS. Yes, they've replaced bisphenol A with bisphenol S, and they label it BPA-free. That's just kind of the stuff that we deal with in the wellness field.
Very sneaky.
Yeah, very sneaky. So BPS is even more harmful than BPA. But I go to this grocery store, I'm seeing BPA-free, and I grab the stuff. And, for those of us that this stuff matters, that's very infuriating. Somebody that doesn't care if there's chemicals in their food or not, or in their items or not, they don't care if there's BPA. But to go to the effort to put BPA-free on a baby bottle that's meant for an infant and instead use BPS, that kind of stuff just gets under my skin, guys. And so the more you study this stuff, the more that you're going to realize that, this is a real thing and it's happening more and more. And, there's something else. They just did a study. I have it right here. This just came across my desk. They tested 259 water bottles, from 11 brands sold across 9 countries, including in the United States. And they found that 93% of those contained microplastic contamination. And this was an Orb Media study. They found that an average of 10.4 plastic particles per liter, and that's twice as the amount they found in tap water. So everybody says, I'm not going to drink this tap water. I buy bottled water. It's healthier. Mm-hmm. It's really not. It has things in it that you're now.
It's just always best to put it through a purifier, right?
Absolutely. And what I do at my house, I have, and this was actually something that I didn't even know about. I bought a whole home water filtration system that goes outside my house. That's it's a very large. It filters the main line coming in. It has a big tank, and
right.
and it has a pre-filter and a post-filter. And it's supposed to take out all of the almost every bacteria, protozoa, mm-hmm. and it also takes out drug residues.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of drug residues like antibiotics and hormones through the water supply. And so it takes all of that out. And I also thought it took fluoride out. Mm-hmm. But I got to doing some research and found out that it did not take fluoride and chlorine out. It just that you can't take that out that easy.
Yeah.
And so the only way to get that out is through reverse osmosis. So what I have in my house now is I have my whole home filtration, filtering all my water coming like to my showers, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. and everywhere else. But I have a second system to go under my sink that does reverse osmosis, so that I have a second little faucet, and that faucet is where we get our drinking and our cooking water, and it is reverse osmosis water.
How much does it cost to install those?
Well, the whole home system is probably going to cost about $1,000.
Right.
And then I believe the little under sink one was maybe a few hundred. I want to say it was a couple hundred there. Right. But what I would encourage people to do is just get the one under the sink.
Right.
That's the water that you eat and drink is probably the most important for what's going into your body. That's really where we should kind of spend most of our focus. All right, so whenever we get back from break, we're going to discuss indoor air pollution. And you're going to be surprised to find out that indoor air can actually be more harmful than outdoor air. And I'll show you some simple solutions to improve your air quality inside your home. So don't go away. We'll be right back on Get Well Acadiana. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And I hope that I didn't get too far deep in the weeds with you guys on that last segment on all of these chemicals, but I just kind of wanted to drive home how important and how they're literally everywhere. We're exposed to them from the time we wake up. You know, we're exposed to these chemicals over and over throughout the day, and they build up in our bodies, you know, and they're causing us to get sick. So I hope that I didn't get too far into the weeds with you on that, but this is an important topic. I consider this the health challenge of the next 50 years. The two big health challenges that we have coming up, the two big concerns that I have in our healthcare system, the first one is the side effects of all of the chemicals and pollutants and toxins that we've put in our bodies, and that I've been talking about today. And the other big health concern that I have over the next 40 or 50 years is the way that the bugs and the bacteria are getting stronger and more diverse and easier to mutate and stronger and more resistant and more powerful. And our immune systems are getting weaker and less able to fight off these things and less effective, and it's going in the wrong direction. So that's kind of my two big concerns with the health challenges in the next 50 years in healthcare, Brandon. Those two things, we're going to have to address those two things, or we're going to be in really serious health problems. You know, we've treated everything with antibiotics for the last 75 years, and that's kind of catching up with us. The bacteria, there's a lot of them that doesn't work so good on anymore, and they're becoming smarter and more powerful and stronger and more resistant. And the other thing is our bodies, because we haven't had to really fight off anything, are getting weaker and less effective. You know, the way our immune system works is when we fight something off, it gets stronger and learns not to be faster and better and stronger the next time that infection comes around. And that's kind of not what's happening. So that's why I wanted to go through that in the first couple of segments today. Is just I feel like that's one of the two big issues that we have in healthcare in the next 50 or 100 years is how we deal with those things. Now, the second topic that I had is I wanted to talk about indoor air pollution. And when you mention air pollution, people think of outdoor pollution, but people will be surprised to learn that our air in our homes and offices especially, is many times worse than outdoor pollution. The EPA has now classified indoor air quality as, quote, a high priority public health threat, 2.5 times worse than outdoor air pollution. And, you know, I mean, you can say whatever you want about the EPA, and I agree with a lot of that stuff too. I mean, I don't really buy into everything they say, but looking at the studies on this, this is the real thing. You know, one issue that we've worked so hard on is making our houses airtight for energy efficiency. You know, we want our air conditioner bill to be as low as we possibly can, so we seal everything up so tight. You know, the windows are sealed, the doors are sealed, and this has allowed something to where there's no air exchange in our homes anymore. You know, tight buildings seal in air pollution, and that's sort of what's resulted from all that. So there are many ways to improve air quality in your home, but most importantly is to eliminate the source of the pollution. And that includes carefully selecting the chemicals and cleaning agents that you use. Number one, I always use green, non-toxic cleansers. There's a ton of good ones. You know, you can use the Method brand or the seventh, I think it's seventh brand, 7 something.
Is it 7th generation?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's tons of really good non-toxic cleansers out there. And, you know, you can even get cleansing recipes online, like a little bit of vinegar and water, or, you know, there's all kinds of simple home recipes for a few pennies that you can clean with other than buying these really expensive, really harmful chemicals. And it also includes properly venting your appliances, purchasing carpets and furniture than clothing that do not emit something called volatile organic chemicals, or VOCs. So I'll give you an example, Brandon. I recently painted my son's room, and I got a special VOC-free paint that I painted his room with. And that means that when the paint's drying, it doesn't release these volatile organic chemicals that have been shown to be, really harmful to him and cause allergy problems and everything else. But VOCs means that the toxic turns to a gas at room temperature. So the toxins sit there and just sort of emit and gas. It's called off-gassing, to where you buy a new couch. That couch sits there, and because it's coated with these certain fabric chemicals or sprays, it will sit and just release toxins into the environment. And it's even worse in humid environments. And guess what? It's pretty humid around here. And then that causes people to have breathing or sinus problems. And, you hear that all the time. People say, well, I didn't have sinus problems until I moved here. Or, I have sinus problems because I live in Louisiana. I mean, that's kind of silly. There's a reason these things are happening, and this humidity and these volatile organic chemicals that's one of the reasons that's happening. So what can be done? Well, like I said, try non-toxic items if you can. Also, on my pesticide company, I have them spray the outside perimeter of my home, but nothing on the inside. You might try that and see if that works. It's worked at my house to where I don't have a whole lot of stuff. I have a lot of spiders and all that, but so I'm getting protection in that sense. But I don't have that stuff sprayed right on my floor where my little boy's playing and his toys are sitting, and the football hits the puddle of pesticide, then he picks it up. All that stuff adds up. Now, candles, believe it or not, are another major source of indoor air pollution. The candle craze has been going strong for quite some time now. Everybody loves candles, including me. But if you've ever blown a candle out, Brandon, after you blow a candle out, it like releases some black stuff at the top right after it goes out. Uh-huh. That's a really harmful toxins that are in that candle. It's made from paraffin wax and petroleum products. And that black soot is full of pollutants. So sometimes even the wick can contain lead. A lot of Chinese candles, the wick has lead in it, that when you burn it, that lead gets in the air. So you want to choose non-toxic candles and cleaning supplies that are all green cleaners that don't release VOCs. And the last thing that I want to mention, and this is a huge problem in Louisiana that no one is acknowledging, and that is mold growth. So, guys, listen, most buildings here have been flooded at one time or another, preventing mold growth or causing mold growth, and preventing it is very difficult. Mold is a huge source of health problems here in Louisiana, and there's something here actually called sick building syndrome, where, say there's an old schoolhouse that's been flooded several times, and there's behind the walls and up in the ceiling there's mold growth, and every time the kid goes to school, he either is hyperactive, or he can't concentrate, or maybe he starts sneezing, or he starts feeling bad, his stomach hurts. Many times this can be one of the underlying sources of these things. And so sometimes I'll have a patient come in, and this is kind of their story. So this is someone who's sick and doesn't know why. They used to be so full of energy, and now they can just barely get through the day. They get headaches of unknown cause. They have fatigue every day. They catch every little cold or flu that comes around. Their sinuses are constantly a problem, and their allergies go crazy almost every day. When at work, they just run out of energy so fast, and can barely breathe good enough to really even get through the day. They've been to many, many doctors with no good answers, and diagnosed with several different things, but nothing's really helped them. Many times, this is the story of the patient who has severe mold sensitivity, and they live in either a water-damaged building or work in a water-damaged building, or it could be a school that's had water damage. This is something that I've been seeing more and more of in my office over the last several years. I didn't see it a lot when I started practicing 20 years ago, But over the last 10 years, it seems to have gotten even worse. And with all the water intrusion in people's houses and businesses over the last few years, I'm seeing more and more of this mold and biotoxin present in patients. And by the way, even if your mold inspector cleared your house, that doesn't mean that this is not still something that is an issue. And it doesn't have to be a dramatic case like the one that I described. It could be a child with headaches or allergies. It could be an adult with just chronic sinus problems or headaches. Molds, fungus, yeast, and bacteria produce something in the body called a biotoxin. And biotoxins are very bad for us. They build up it's this buildup of small particles in our bodies from broken down sort of germs and molds that is what causes us to feel bad. And these patients usually have complicated and confusing symptoms. And you know, there's no individual thing they can pin down of why they have, like, say, sinus problems or headaches or allergy problems. And many times this is what we find that it is. Some of the molds now can even form what's called biofilms, which means when they get in your body, they form kind of this layer that walls them off from you and that your immune system can't get there and kill them. It creates this film around it called a biofilm that your body can't get through. So things are getting, the bugs are getting smart. You know, that's what I was saying earlier, that these molds and bacteria and stuff are starting to, you know, they've been evolving this whole time to get stronger and stronger. And so, you know, we need to really know about that and pay attention to it. So there's a variety of toxic compounds in our homes, and it's nearly impossible to blame one single compound or label one particular thing. How are you going to say it was that one particular chemical that caused me to feel this way when there's 15 others? And what happens, it creates this sort of toxic stew of environmental pollutants, molds, biotoxins, and particles. And it's very hard to pin this down. And it stumps doctors many times trying to find out what the underlying reason is. And it could be this sort of sick building or sick home syndrome causing all of these things to come about. And, you know, now the coolest part of this, Brandon, is we have a simple little test we can now perform that's completely non-invasive to tell if a patient has buildup of biotoxins in their body. And it uses the visual contrast scale. So when we have biofilms and biotoxins in our body, it affects the way that our eyes are able to read contrasting lines. So I have this paper that's on this testing unit, and you can read contrasting lines, and we can score you to see if you may actually have a buildup of biotoxin in your body that you're dealing with. So we take patients with things like sinus problems and allergy problems, and we run them through this visual contrast scale, or this visual contrast sensitivity scale, and I can tell them if it's caused from this or not. And if it is caused from this, we can give patients relief after they've been dealing with sinus and allergy problems for years. I've seen patients spend $20,000, $30,000 worth of testing and still no answers when this can determine that it's just simply they have a mold or a biotoxin sensitivity. All right, thanks for joining us. We're going to come back right after this break and talk about our water supply, so don't go away. Welcome back to Get Well Acadiana with Dr. Kevin. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that this show has been somewhat of an eye-opener, and I really hope that it was interesting to you. I tried to just give you the highlights of all of the particles and toxins and biofilms that's building up in our body, and how this is one of the major health crises that we're going to be dealing with over the next 4 or 5 decades. And so I've got one more subject that I wanted to talk about just real briefly, and that is I wanted to talk about fluorinating our water supply. And this is something that is somewhat controversial, and I know that this has been going on for decades, but recently we're starting to re-examine if there really are any benefits, why our government started using it, and is there any harm? Now, according to the powers to be, fluoride in our drinking water helps coat our teeth and protect them from cavities, right? That's what we grew up knowing and thinking. And so the CDC even called fluoridating our drinking water one of the top 10 greatest medical achievements of the 20th century. And, that may be so, but it's a new century. And I think there's far better ways of taking care of our teeth and getting fluoride onto our teeth than to dump a chemical so toxic as fluoride into everyone's drinking water with a whole host of negative consequences. And that's the bottom line with this. If you're going to put fluoride on your teeth, there's a lot easier ways to do it in today's society. Maybe not 100 years ago or 50, maybe not 80 years ago. If you needed to get fluoride on teeth, maybe this was the best way, but I don't think it is today. Now, just follow me through this, because everyone's reaction when you bring this up is always, well, what do you mean? We have to put it in our water. It helps our teeth, because that's what we've been told since the 50s. But has anybody actually looked at the research themselves to determine if it's the best thing to put in our water supply? Fluoride ranks right below mercury on the toxicity scale. It is a very potent toxic chemical. And so, the story goes that if you're going to prevent cavities, you have to put this fluoride in our drinking water. And, none of the studies were done in a very honest way, in my opinion, that looked at this. And I can't really find any answers about how this actually all came about. It's pretty sketchy. Now, by some accounts, this began after a huge fertilizer and aluminum industry had tons and tons of leftover fluoride from the manufacturing of fertilizer and aluminum. And they were looking at paying big bucks to get rid of it because it's hazardous waste. Now, somehow the story of it helping our teeth came about, and before we knew it, the government was actually paying these companies to dump it in our water supply. So instead of them paying to get rid of it, which is very expensive because fluoride's a hazardous waste, now they're getting paid to dump it in our water supply because of some studies that showed that it might help our teeth. Now, that's, I don't know if that's exactly how it happened. I don't know how much of that's actually true or not. I do know that fluoride in our drinking water in 2015 might not be the best idea. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm just saying that there's some research that shows that maybe we could do better than that. Now, according to this one Harvard researcher, they looked at 27 different studies on fluoridating our drinking water, and virtually every study showed a marked decrease in mental acuity and capacity in areas of higher fluoride in the drinking water. The people had lower IQs in virtually every area that they looked at where they had fluoride in the drinking water. So that's something that we need to take a look at. If you look at the studies on this, which I have, several more topics that I could have gone over. I'm out of time today, but I could talk more about this fluoride in our drinking water, and I may get into it again on another show one day. But if you look at all of the studies and you put everything together, it might not be the best way to get fluoride on our teeth is to put it in our drinking water, because it goes in our bodies and it affects a lot more than our teeth. We have fluoride toothpaste. We have fluoride tooth rinses, fluoride mouthwash, fluoride treatments for the teeth. Why can't we just put it directly on our teeth and then spit it out? I think it would be way better. And that's what I try to do for my son. I just put the fluoride on his teeth, and he used non-fluoride toothpaste all the way up until he was old enough not to swallow it. When he was an infant, he used fluoride-free toothpaste, and he's 7 and he still does. He can pretty soon switch to fluorinated toothpaste, but as of right now, he's still doing the non-fluoride just because I want to make sure we get as little of it in his body as possible. Just like I want to make sure we put as little of all of these things that I talked about in our bodies and in your body as well. Just know that these chemicals are making us sick. I've gone over several different ones and several different solutions. And I want you to understand this is a slow buildup in the body. It's not something that's going to make you sick today or tomorrow. But if you start being exposed to chemicals before you're even born, and then by the time you're 40, your liver is overloaded, and it's caused everything from obesity to diabetes to depression, anxiety, ADD, and majorly thyroid and hormone disruption. Most of these chemicals, the number one thing they do is disrupt our hormonal balance. Thank you all for joining me. If there's ever anything I can do for any of you out there, you can always call my office at 837 7174. And I would love to have a phone conversation with you about your health problems. And I can probably tell you right there over the phone if it's something that, I think that might be worth your time to get looked at or not. May not be able to tell you what's wrong, but I can probably tell you if it's even worth a chance to let me see if my methods would help you. So if you ever want to have a phone conversation with me, you can always call my office at 837-7174 and leave your name and number right on my voicemail. It's Saturday. Obviously, I'm not at work. You can call 837-7174 and leave your number, and I'll call you back Monday when I get to work. You guys have a great weekend. We'll talk next week.